You can't even pay rent. My mom's voice cut through the living room like a blade, sharp enough to leave wounds no one could see. She wasn't screaming. No, this was worse. Flat, cold, laced with disappointment. I froze, coffee mug in hand, my knuckles white as I held it too tightly, wanting to shout the truth but choking it back. She had no idea. No clue that for the last 3 years, while she tossed around insults, while she rolled her eyes at my choices, I had been quietly, relentlessly, secretly paying her $4,800 mortgage every month. 36 months. $172,800. Gone, sacrificed, unmentioned. She thought I couldn't even pay rent. I forced a smile and said nothing. Okay, Mom, I muttered, keeping my voice calm, hiding the storm. She turned back to her phone, scrolling, her words already forgotten by her, but carved into me. Inside I screamed. Every dollar I had poured into that house, every late night I worked double shifts, every dream I postponed, it all felt erased in that moment. I walked outside because I couldn't breathe. The autumn air slapped me, cold and biting, but better than suffocating inside. I sat on the front steps, the same ones I used to sit on as a kid when life was simple, when I thought my mom hung the moon, when her approval was the only prize I wanted. Now her words rang in my ears, you can't even pay rent, looping endlessly. Rent. I was paying something 5 times that. And she never asked why the bank didn't take the house, never wondered why the foreclosure notices stopped coming. She just lived, assuming it was luck or timing. Maybe that was my fault. Maybe I should have told her the truth. Maybe I should have said, Mom, listen, you sleep under this roof because of me. But I didn't. I let her believe the worst of me because somehow it felt easier than explaining. She always wanted me safe, predictable, steady. She wanted me to take a government job, be a teacher, a nurse, anything with benefits and a retirement plan. But I wasn't wired that way. I wanted more. I wanted to build something on my own, create instead of clocking in, risk instead of routine. She never understood that. Every time I stumbled, and God, did I stumble, she was there, saying she told me so. That night her words burned deeper than usual. I lay in my apartment, the ceiling paint peeling, wondering if she was right. Maybe I was a fool. Maybe covering her mortgage all this time was the dumbest decision of my life. Maybe I should have built my own life instead of propping up hers. But then I remembered the day I found out. 3 years ago, I saw the pile of unopened envelopes in her kitchen. One said, "Final notice." My stomach dropped. She was months behind. Foreclosure wasn't a threat, it was a countdown. I confronted her, and she broke. My mom, the woman who had never let me see her cry, sobbed into her hands like a child. That moment split me open. I couldn't let her lose the house. Not the house Dad painted himself, not the house where birthdays and Christmases lived, not the house that carried our whole family's history in its walls. So I made a choice. I stepped in, quietly. I picked up the mortgage, dragging it like a cross on my back month after month. I never asked for thanks. I never told my siblings. I didn't need credit. At least that's what I told myself. But 3 years later, her words hit like betrayal. She had no idea the sacrifices I had made. No idea how many nights I stayed up working side hustles, how many meals I skipped, how many luxuries I denied myself just so she could sleep in that house without fear. And still she said, "You can't even pay rent." I pressed my palms into my eyes that night, fighting tears I hated to admit were there. I hated crying, hated feeling weak, but the truth is those tears were strength finally spilling out. Lying awake, I whispered to the ceiling, "One day, they'll know. One day, the truth will come out." I didn't know how. I didn't know when. But I knew secrets like this didn't stay buried forever. And when that day came, when the truth finally burned into the open, every sacrifice, every insult, every sleepless night would finally mean something. At least, that's what I prayed. Because lying there in the dark, I wasn't sure I believed it anymore. I didn't become the family disappointment overnight, though sometimes it felt like that's how my mom saw me, like one day I was her kid with potential and the next I was the screw-up she could never brag about. The truth is, my path didn't look like my siblings. They followed the script: college, stable jobs, health insurance, neat apartments they could post on Instagram. I veered off. I was the one who chased odd jobs, freelanced, jumped from one thing to the next while trying to build something that was mine. And in her eyes, that meant failure. I still remember my first apartment after college, a one-bedroom above a laundromat where the smell of detergent seeped through the floorboards. I thought it was freedom. My mom came to visit once, looked around at the peeling paint, the mismatched furniture, the noisy street outside, and shook her head. "You should have gone to nursing school," she said flatly. "At least then you could afford a real place." I laughed it off, but inside it stung. I wasn't lazy. I worked more hours than anyone I knew. I picked up shifts at a diner, delivered groceries, coded websites late into the night, sometimes sleeping at my desk. I lived off ramen and $5 pizzas because every spare dollar went into either keeping myself afloat or funding the next big idea that I swore would be the one. And yet, no matter how hard I pushed, it never seemed like enough. To her, my hustle looked like instability. To me, it looked like survival. I'll never forget the day I learned she was drowning. I had stopped by the house unannounced. Something I rarely did, mostly to avoid the constant comparisons she threw at me. She was at work, but the mail was piled high on the kitchen counter. Normally, I wouldn't snoop, but one envelope caught my eye, bold red letters, "Final notice." I opened it with shaking hands. Past due mortgage payments. Thousands of dollars behind. The house I grew up in was slipping away, and she hadn't told a soul. When she came home that night, I confronted her, letter in hand. She broke. My mother, the woman who had always carried herself with steel in her spine, sat at the kitchen table and sobbed. Between gasps she admitted she couldn't keep up. After Dad left, everything fell on her. The mortgage, the bills, the endless weight of survival. She said she was drowning and didn't know how much longer she could fake it. That night something shifted in me. For years, I had been trying to prove her wrong, to prove I wasn't the failure she painted me as. But watching her break like that, I didn't care about being right anymore. I cared about saving her, even if she'd never give me credit. I told her I'd help. She shook her head immediately, said, "You can't even take care of yourself. Don't make promises you can't keep." Those words lit a fire in me. The very next day I started rearranging my life. I picked up more freelance gigs, doubled my diner shifts, cut every expense I could. I moved into a smaller place, sold half my stuff, even gave up my car. I walked to work, rain or shine, because every dollar saved was a dollar that could go to her mortgage. The first time I made that $4,800 payment, I cried in the bathroom of the bank. Not because I felt heroic, but because I didn't know how I was going to survive the next month. But I did. I scraped by, sometimes barely eating, sometimes sleeping only a few hours a night, but I made the payment again. And again. And again. That became my life. For 3 years. On the outside, I looked like the struggling kid who never quite got it together. Inside, I was carrying the weight of a house, a family legacy, a secret that no one knew. My siblings assumed Mom had gotten a loan modification. My relatives thought she'd picked up extra shifts. No one asked me, because no one believed I could possibly be the one. And maybe that's what hurt the most. They all underestimated me. They all bought into the story that I was the embarrassment, the one who couldn't keep his head above water. I let them believe it because the truth was too heavy to explain. How do you tell your family you're the reason they still gather for holidays in the same living room? How do you say, "I'm the one holding it all together," without sounding bitter or desperate for credit? You don't. You swallow it. You let them mock you, doubt you, underestimate you, and you keep paying the bill anyway. That's what I did. And the more I sacrificed, the deeper the resentment grew. Not toward them, but toward myself. Because there were nights when I'd lie awake wondering, what if she's right? What if I really am failing? What if this secret sacrifice isn't noble, it's just stupid? What if I've wasted 3 years of my life keeping someone else's house afloat while my own dreams withered? Still, every time I asked those questions, I remembered her face that night at the kitchen table, her hands shaking, her shoulders hunched, her sobs filling the room. And I knew I couldn't stop. Because no matter what she said to me, no matter how many times she reminded me I wasn't enough, I couldn't let her lose the house. Even if it meant she never knew the truth. The hardest part wasn't the money, though every month felt like I was walking a tightrope with no net. The hardest part was living 2 lives at once. On one side, there was the face I showed the world, the struggling sibling who could barely keep it together, the one everyone pitied or mocked depending on the day. On the other side, there was the hidden truth. I was the silent lifeline, the one carrying the weight of a mortgage that could crush most families. Keeping those 2 worlds from colliding became an art form. My days were a blur of hustling, stringing together shifts like mismatched puzzle pieces. At the diner, I poured coffee until my hands smelled like burnt beans, wiped down counters until my back ached, and smiled at customers who barely noticed I existed. When my shift ended, I'd rush across town to deliver groceries, hauling bags up 3 flights of stairs for people who tipped me $2 if I was lucky. Then I'd go home, sit at my desk, and dive into freelance work, coding websites, designing logos, editing videos, anything that would put a few extra dollars in my account. Some nights I didn't even bother with the bed. I'd fall asleep at the desk, wake up with keyboard marks on my cheek, and start over again. My body broke down slowly. First, it was the constant fatigue, then the back pain, then the weight loss from skipping meals I couldn't afford. I used to love pizza night with friends, but now I made excuses not to go. Every slice was money that could help keep the house afloat. Birthdays came and went, but I stopped celebrating mine. What was the point when I couldn't even buy myself a gift without guilt clawing at my chest? Meanwhile, my siblings paraded their successes. My brother bragged about his new car, my sister posted endless pictures of vacations and wine tastings. At family gatherings, they would ask, "So what are you doing these days?" with that tone, half curious, half condescending. I'd shrug and say, "Just working odd jobs," and they'd nod knowingly, as if they had me figured out. Mom never corrected them. If anything, she reinforced the image. "You should be more like your brother," she'd say in front of everyone. "At least he's stable." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that while they toasted champagne, I was breaking my back to keep the roof over Mom's head. But instead I swallowed it. I sat there and let them think I was nothing. Because if they knew the truth, they'd never let me hear the end of it. They'd call me stupid for sacrificing so much without recognition. They'd tell me it wasn't my job to save her. And maybe they'd be right. But I couldn't stop. The house wasn't just bricks and wood, it was childhood memories, family dinners, Christmas mornings, the only constant in a world that kept changing. I wasn't about to let foreclosure erase all that. So I kept grinding. I tracked every dollar, every cent. My spreadsheet became my lifeline, rows of numbers representing sacrifices no one saw. Rent for my tiny apartment, $650. Utilities, $90. Groceries, $120. Everything else, every last dollar, went to Mom's mortgage. $4,800. Every month. Like clockwork. There were times I wanted to quit. Times I sat in the dark staring at the overdue notices for my own bills, wondering if I was just digging my own grave. I remember one night in particular. It was winter, my heat had been shut off, and I was wrapped in 3 layers of blankets trying to finish a freelance project. My phone buzzed. It was a family group chat, a picture of everyone at Mom's house, gathered by the fireplace, smiling. I wasn't invited. I stared at the photo until my vision blurred. They didn't even notice I wasn't there. They didn't notice that the fire in the background was burning because of me. That night, I broke down. I screamed into the pillow, fists clenched, tears soaking the fabric. For the first time, I thought about stopping. I thought about letting it all collapse, about watching their perfect little gatherings fall apart when the bank took the house. But then I thought of Mom. I thought of her hands shaking the night I found the letter, her sobs filling the kitchen. I couldn't let that happen again. No matter how much it hurt, I couldn't let her lose everything. So I wiped my tears, pulled the blankets tighter, and kept working. Every sacrifice became part of me. Skipping meals wasn't hunger, it was determination. Walking miles in the rain wasn't misery, it was proof I could endure. Missing out on life wasn't failure, it was survival. Still, the loneliness ate at me. There's something soul-crushing about carrying a burden no one knows about. You want to share it, to confess, to have someone look at you and say, I see you. I know what you're doing. But no one ever did. I walked through life invisible, the family embarrassment on the surface, the family savior in secret. And as the years ticked by, I started to wonder how long I could keep it up. 3 years is a long time to live in the shadows. 3 years of watching my siblings climb while I crawled. 3 years of Mom dismissing me, never knowing I was the one saving her. I began to ask myself the question that kept me up at night. What happens when I can't do it anymore? What happens when the weight breaks me? It happened in the middle of year 3, right when I thought I had found my rhythm, when the endless grind had almost become second nature, when I thought maybe I could keep this double life going forever. Life has a cruel way of testing you right when you start to believe you've got it figured out. That month had already been brutal. 2 of my freelance clients ghosted me without paying, leaving me short. The diner cut my hours because business was slow, and I had to pick up every grocery delivery shift I could just to keep the numbers from going red. Still, even with all that, I was a few $100s short of the mortgage. I stared at my spreadsheet one night, my chest tight, hands shaking, realizing for the first time I might not be able to make it. The thought of calling the bank to explain, to beg for a grace period, made me sick. I couldn't let Mom get another notice in the mail. Not after all this time. Not after 3 years of perfection. So I did what I swore I wouldn't do. I took out a payday loan. The kind with interest so steep it's practically theft. I told myself it was just once, that I'd pay it back in a few weeks. But once you open that door, it's hard to close it. Suddenly I wasn't just juggling Mom's mortgage, I was juggling sharks circling closer every day. I barely slept. I delivered groceries until 2 in the morning, only to wake up 4 hours later to work on design projects I barely had the energy to finish. My body ached constantly. My head pounded like a drum. The bags under my eyes turned into dark hollows. I caught my reflection one morning in the diner bathroom and didn't even recognize myself. Pale, gaunt, hollow-cheeked. I looked like the failure they already believed I was. And then, the breaking point came. It was a Saturday. I had been working non-stop, trying to scrape together the last bit of money I owed the loan sharks, when Mom called. I answered, exhausted but hopeful maybe she just wanted to check in. Instead, her voice came sharp, annoyed. You didn't come to your sister's baby shower, she said. Do you even care about this family? I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My throat tightened. She kept going, frustration spilling out like venom. You can't even pay your own rent, and now you can't bother to show up for your sister? Do you know how embarrassing that is? Everyone asked where you were, and I had to make excuses. I'm tired of covering for you. I wanted to shout the truth, to tell her I wasn't at the baby shower because I was working a 14-hour day to cover the mortgage that kept her roof over her head. I wanted to scream that I wasn't the embarrassment, she was for never seeing me. But I didn't. I just sat there in silence, tears streaming down my face while she tore me apart. I don't know what happened to you, she said finally. But you've become nothing but a burden. When she hung up, I sat in the dark, phone in my lap, chest aching like someone had punched straight through it. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually something inside me snapped. I walked into the kitchen, opened the cabinet, and stared at the bottle of cheap whiskey I kept for nights when the weight was too much. I poured a glass, then another, until the edges of the world blurred and the pain dulled. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't care if the mortgage got paid. I didn't care if the house vanished. I just wanted the weight gone. I stumbled to bed and prayed I wouldn't wake up. But I did. And when I did, everything felt heavier. The bills, the debt, the secret, the loneliness. I didn't get up for 2 days. I ignored calls, skipped shifts, let deadlines pass. For the first time, I considered disappearing, walking away from it all. But then, on the 3rd day, I checked the mail. There was a card from my niece, drawn in bright crayon colors, with uneven letters that read, "Thank you for always helping Grandma. I love you." My chest cracked open. Tears poured down my face as I held that piece of paper, that small, innocent acknowledgement from someone too young to understand the weight of what I was doing, but somehow aware enough to know I was trying. That card saved me. It was like someone had reached into the darkness and lit a match. I realized then that maybe Mom would never see me, maybe my siblings would never understand, but someone did. Even if it was just a child with crayons, someone saw me. And that was enough to get up again. Enough to keep going. Enough to make one more payment. After the breakdown, after the whiskey and the darkness and the card from my niece, I knew something had to change. I couldn't keep living on the edge of collapse. If I kept going the way I was, either my body or my mind would give out, and then what good would I be to anyone? I told myself I needed to find a spark, something more sustainable than scraping pennies together, something that could turn all those endless nights of hustling into more than just survival. It came by accident, the way most of the best things do. I was at the diner on a slow afternoon when a man came in, dressed in a suit too sharp for a place that smelled like bacon grease and burnt coffee. He sat at the counter, ordered a black coffee, and pulled out his laptop. I noticed him struggling to format something on the screen. Without thinking, I said, "Control-Shift+M will fix that margin." He looked up, surprised, then followed my advice. When it worked, he chuckled. "You know your stuff." I shrugged, embarrassed, but he asked what I did outside the diner. For a moment I thought about lying, about saying I was just figuring things out, but something inside me pushed back. "I design websites," I said quietly. He raised an eyebrow. "Really?" "Because my company's site is a disaster." "How much do you charge?" My heart raced. I gave him a number so low I was almost ashamed, terrified I'd scare him off. Instead, he grinned. "Send me your info. Let's see what you can do." That night I stayed up reworking his company site, pouring every ounce of creativity and precision I had into it. When I sent it back the next morning, I expected silence. Instead, he called me personally. "This is incredible. I'd like to keep you on retainer." That one project turned into 2, then 5, then 10. Word spread quietly in his network. Suddenly, I wasn't just coding for scraps on freelance sites. I had real clients, businesses that valued my work, people who didn't see me as the family embarrassment but as someone delivering results. For the first time in years, I felt possibility stirring. The money wasn't billionaire level, but it was steady, far more than the diner or deliveries ever gave me. I still worked long hours, but the grind felt different, less like drowning, more like swimming towards something. And with each invoice paid, I breathed a little easier. I began to imagine a life where I wasn't just surviving. But the thing about sparks is they scare you. I had grown so used to living in the shadows, so used to being unseen, that success, even small success, felt dangerous. Part of me was terrified of what would happen if Mom or my siblings found out. Would they laugh? Would they dismiss it? Would they finally admit I wasn't a failure, or would they just take and take until there was nothing left? So I kept it quiet. I still let them believe I was struggling, still let Mom tell people I couldn't pay rent. I didn't correct her when she sighed about my aimless life. I bit my tongue when my brother joked about me being the charity case of the family. I let them believe it because the alternative, the truth, felt too fragile to expose. Inside, though, something was shifting. I no longer cried when I made the mortgage payment. I no longer dreaded the first of the month. Instead, I looked at the bank statement with quiet pride. I was still carrying the weight, yes, but now I was also climbing, step by step. There was one night, late, when I sat at my desk surrounded by empty coffee cups and open tabs, and I realized I was smiling. Actually smiling. Not because everything was fixed, but because for the first time in years, I believed it could be. That spark, small as it was, lit a fire I hadn't felt since before the burden began. I started sketching ideas for my own company, a real business instead of just scattered gigs. I thought about how I could scale, how I could grow, how maybe one day I wouldn't just be covering Mom's mortgage, I'd be thriving on my own terms. It felt like standing at the edge of something vast, terrifying, and beautiful. And I wanted it. I wanted it more than I had ever wanted their approval, more than I had ever wanted to prove them wrong. I wanted to prove it to myself. The spark didn't just stay a spark, it grew. Within 6 months, my list of clients had tripled. I was designing websites for local businesses, small startups, even a nonprofit that needed a digital overhaul. My laptop became my lifeline, the portal to a future I could barely believe was unfolding. The diner shifts dwindled, then disappeared altogether. I kept delivering groceries for a while, partly out of habit, partly out of fear that the new success might vanish overnight. But soon, even that wasn't necessary. My income stabilized. For the first time in years, I could pay Mom's mortgage without gasping for air. I could buy groceries without calculating down to the cent. I even replaced my broken phone, though I told my family it was a hand-me-down from a client so they wouldn't question how I could afford it. And yet, even as my world expanded, my family's view of me remained frozen. They didn't see the late nights filled with coding and client calls. They didn't see the growing invoices or the spreadsheets filled with green numbers instead of red. They only saw the version of me they had decided on years ago, the disappointment, the screw-up, the embarrassment. Every family gathering was a test of patience. Still bouncing around from job to job, my brother would ask, smirking like it was a punchline. You really should think about something more stable. My sister, now a proud mother, would chime in, it's not too late to go back to school, you know. Maybe nursing or teaching. Something reliable. And Mom, always the harshest, would sigh and say, you're not getting any younger. At some point, you need to face reality. I would sit there, swallowing the urge to tell them the truth, to throw down a bank statement and watch their faces crumble. But I never did. Because deep down, I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing it for her, for Mom, even if she never knew. Still, the tension grew heavier each time. It's one thing to carry a secret when no one notices you at all. It's another to carry it while being mocked, belittled, dismissed right to your face. The resentment built like pressure in a boiler, and I didn't know how much longer I could contain it. One night, after a particularly brutal dinner where Mom had compared me to my brother's 6-figure salary for the 100th time, I drove home shaking with anger. I slammed the door behind me, paced the tiny apartment, and finally screamed into the silence. Why do I let them do this? Why do I keep saving her when she won't even see me? The words echoed off the walls, harsh and raw. For a moment, I considered stopping. I had the money now. I could build my own life, move into a better place, invest in my future instead of propping up someone who never believed in me. The thought was intoxicating. But then, like always, the image came back, Mom at the kitchen table, crumpled and sobbing, the final notice shaking in her hand. That memory anchored me, kept me tethered to the responsibility I had chosen. So I pushed on. My business grew, but so did the divide between me and my family. They couldn't see me, and I couldn't let them. The secrecy gnawed at me. At night, when the glow of my laptop lit up the room, I'd imagine what it would feel like to tell them everything, to watch their smug expressions fall away as they realized the truth. But every time I played the scene out in my head, it ended the same, with them twisting it into something ugly, accusing me of trying to buy love, of being reckless, of still not being enough. So I kept my silence. And yet, silence has a way of hardening into walls. I started pulling back, skipping more family gatherings, letting their calls go unanswered. When I did show up, I stayed quiet, distant, a ghost at the table. They thought it was more proof of my failure. In reality, it was self-preservation. The tension reached its peak one night when Mom called me, her voice sharp as a blade. "Your brother said you still don't have steady work," she snapped. "Do you ever think about how embarrassing that is for me? I raised 3 kids, and somehow you're the one who can't get it together." I gripped the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. I wanted to shout that I was the reason she still had a house to live in, that without me, she'd be homeless. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I bit down on the fury and said, "I'm doing the best I can, Mom." She sighed, disappointed, as always. "Well, your best isn't enough." After she hung up, I sat there in the dark, shaking. Growth had given me money, stability, even hope for the future. But it hadn't given me the one thing I thought it might: recognition. Acceptance. Love. If anything, the better I did in secret, the more invisible I became. And I started to wonder how much longer I could live with that contradiction, thriving in the shadows while dying in the light. It happened sooner than I expected, the moment when all the careful silence I had maintained for 3 years began to crack. I didn't plan for it, didn't see it coming, and yet when it arrived, it hit like a thunderclap. It was a Saturday afternoon, and Mom had called the whole family over for a casual brunch, a rare event. I considered skipping, as I often did, but something made me go. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was the need to see her face, to see the woman I'd been secretly protecting all this time. I walked into the house and felt the familiar mix of warmth and suffocating tension. My siblings were already there, chattering, showing off, laughing. Mom glanced up from the kitchen, her eyes briefly meeting mine before she returned to slicing fruit with precision. I kept my head down, pretending I had no idea how my presence would be dismissed, how my achievements would be ignored. As the brunch progressed, the subtle digs began. "You've been freelancing forever, right?" my brother asked with a smirk. "Still no real job." My sister laughed lightly, not cruelly, but enough to make me flinch. Mom didn't intervene. She just nodded like the embarrassment in front of her was perfectly acceptable. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them all that I had been keeping this house standing, that I had paid $4,800 every single month for the past 3 years, that without me, there would be no brunch, no kitchen, no roof over their heads. But I didn't. I sipped my coffee, pretending I didn't hear it, pretending I wasn't trembling with rage. And then, a small slip of paper changed everything. My niece, the same one who had once drawn me that crayon card, dropped a receipt on the table. "Uncle," she said shyly, "look what Grandma gave me." I picked it up, expecting a drawing or a note, and froze. It was a bank statement. Not just any statement, it was the mortgage payment schedule, highlighted, annotated, with notes about transfers that matched my own bank records. My stomach dropped. Everyone else noticed it too, and for the first time, I saw the confusion on Mom's face. Where did this come from?" she stammered, eyes darting between me and my niece. I wanted to laugh, to cry, to scream all at once. The truth, which I had guarded so fiercely, was now exposed. My siblings leaned in, staring at me in disbelief. "Wait, you've been paying this?" my brother said, his voice caught somewhere between shock and awe. "All this time?" I nodded, feeling a surge of both vindication and anger. "All this time," I said. "Every month for the past 3 years." The room went silent. Even the clock seemed to pause. Mom's hands trembled as she reached for a chair to steady herself. I didn't know," she whispered, almost inaudibly, her voice cracking. I thought you were struggling." I could feel the tension in my chest finally start to release, but not entirely. "I was struggling, Mom," I said, voice tight. "But I made it work. For you. For this house. For all of you. I did everything you told me I couldn't do." The words hung in the air like a lightning strike. My brother opened his mouth, then closed it, the color draining from his face. My sister's eyes widened. Mom sank into her chair, head in her hands, muttering, "I can't believe." I never realized. I let it settle. I let the silence stretch. And then, I spoke again, softer this time, because I didn't want to hurt her further, I just wanted acknowledgement. "Do you understand now?" Every insult, every laugh, every, "you can't even pay rent," I heard it all. But I kept going. Not for me, but for you. For this family. Tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wanted her to see, really see, the truth I had carried alone for so long. Finally, Mom lifted her head, eyes wet, lips trembling. I'm so sorry," she said. "I had no idea. I never realized how hard you've been working, what you've been sacrificing. I was wrong about you. I see it now." I exhaled, a mixture of relief and lingering anger. "It's taken 3 years for this to matter," I said quietly, "but I'm glad you finally see." My siblings were still stunned. My brother, who had once mocked me relentlessly, finally said, I can't believe this. I thought you were failing. I owe you more than I can ever say." My sister nodded, tears brimming. "We never knew." I'm sorry too." The room was heavy with unspoken emotion, a weight finally shared. And for the first time, I felt like the underdog who had won, not because I shouted or demanded recognition, but because I endured, silently, with strength no one could measure. Mom reached across the table and took my hand. "You've always been the strongest," she said, voice trembling. I didn't understand it before. I do now." I nodded, tears finally falling freely down my cheeks. The confrontation had ended not in argument or defeat, but in revelation, in truth. And for the first time in years, I felt seen, truly seen, by the woman whose words had haunted me, whose criticism had pushed me to the edge, and whose love I had never questioned, even when she seemed blind to my efforts. That brunch marked the turning point. The tension that had defined my life for so long began to melt away. Recognition had arrived, delayed but undeniable, and with it came a new kind of freedom, not the freedom from bills or hard work, but freedom from invisibility, from judgment, from the shadow I had carried alone. Finally, I was not just the family embarrassment or the struggling child. I was the one who had kept them afloat. The one who had endured. And for the first time, I felt that all the years of sacrifice had not been in vain. After that brunch, the air in the house shifted. It wasn't immediate, and it wasn't perfect, but it was real. Mom still had her sharp edges, and my siblings still carried their assumptions, but the truth had broken through the walls we'd all built around ourselves. I could see it in the way she glanced at me when no one was looking, a quiet acknowledgement in her eyes that she had been blind, that she had underestimated me. That evening, she pulled me aside into the kitchen, the same kitchen where I had first discovered the mortgage notices, where I had first decided to save the house on my own. "I owe you more than I can ever put into words," she said softly, her voice almost breaking. "I was so wrong about you, about everything. I can't believe it took me this long to see who you really are." I felt tears burn behind my eyes, and I reached for her hand, squeezing it tightly. "It's okay, Mom," I said. "I didn't do it for credit. I did it because I couldn't let the house go, couldn't let our family lose what we built together. That was enough for me." She shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. "It's never enough to just be responsible, is it? You should have gotten the recognition you deserved from the start. I see that now. I'm sorry for every harsh word, every doubt, every time I made you feel like a failure." Her apology, genuine and raw, struck me harder than any insult ever had. For years I had carried her judgments like bricks in my chest. Finally, she was removing them, one by one. That night, we sat together, talking for hours, sharing memories and regrets, and laughing quietly at the absurdity of it all. She asked about the sacrifices I had made, the long nights, the missed meals, the financial juggling. I told her some of it, carefully, knowing I didn't need to share every detail, just enough so she understood the weight I had carried. She listened, really listened, and I could feel her understanding deepen. "You are incredible," she said finally. "I can't believe I missed it for so long. I hope you know that I'm proud of you. Truly proud." And I believed her. For the first time, I did. In the weeks that followed, the dynamic with my siblings began to shift as well. My brother, who had once mocked my freelancing gigs, started asking for advice on side projects he wanted to try. My sister, who had always dismissed my choices, started celebrating my wins, small as they were, and inviting me into her life with a respect I had never seen before. Family dinners no longer carried the weight of judgment and comparison. Conversations were still lively, full of laughter, but there was a new undercurrent of understanding, of recognition, that hadn't existed before. I felt lighter, freer, like I was stepping into a world where my efforts could finally be acknowledged without fear of mockery. And yet, the biggest change was inside me. I realized that while the mortgage had been the burden, the real weight had been the silence, the invisible struggle, the constant need to prove myself to people who couldn't see me. Now that the truth was out, I could breathe. I could dream bigger. I could plan for the future without the shadow of being unseen hanging over me. That realization gave me a new drive. I expanded my business, investing in my own brand, taking on bigger clients, creating opportunities that would have been unimaginable before. But the biggest reward wasn't financial, it was emotional. I had finally been recognized for who I truly was, and that validation, delayed though it was, fueled me more than any paycheck could. One afternoon, Mom surprised me by leaving a small gift on my desk at the house, a framed photograph of our family in front of the house I had saved. She had written on the back, "For the one who kept us together when we didn't even know it. We love you." I stared at it, tears flowing freely, and felt a rush of emotions: pride, relief, joy, and finally, a profound sense of belonging. The family that had once seen me as an embarrassment now saw me as a cornerstone, a protector, a force that held us together. And for the first time, I let myself truly believe that I was enough. That I had always been enough. That everything I had endured, every long night, every insult, every dollar spent in silence, had led me to this moment. Sitting there with the framed photograph, I realized that the journey had not just been about saving a house or paying a mortgage. It had been about proving to myself, and eventually to them, that strength, resilience, and love are invisible powers, ones that don't need applause to exist, ones that carry people forward even when no one notices. I leaned back, smiling through the tears, feeling a weight lift that I hadn't known I had been carrying for years. The house was still ours, yes, but more importantly, so was the family. And finally, so was I. Months passed after the confrontation, and life began to settle into a rhythm I had never imagined possible. The weight I had carried for 3 years, the secret sacrifices, the invisible labor, finally felt like it belonged somewhere. Not because I had finished paying off Mom's mortgage, though that was a relief, but because I no longer carried it alone. Recognition had changed everything. I had built something real with my business, landing clients who respected my work and paid what it was worth. I could invest in myself, save for my own apartment, even consider buying a place that was fully mine. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same family who thought I couldn't manage my own rent now depended on me for financial insight and advice. I had become the quiet backbone of the family, the one who proved that perseverance and resilience could outlast judgment and doubt. My mornings were no longer a frantic scramble between jobs and side hustles. I still worked hard, yes, but now there was strategy behind every move, purpose behind every long night at my laptop. I had the freedom to choose clients, to scale projects, to design websites that reflected my creativity and vision. And with that freedom came a new confidence, one that I carried into family interactions. They noticed the change, of course. My siblings stopped making snide remarks about my freelancing, and Mom's admiration became a quiet presence, a gentle acknowledgement that she had always depended on me more than she ever admitted. One evening, I walked into the living room to find her sitting at the dining table, reviewing papers. She looked up at me with that soft smile that used to be rare. "I can't tell you how proud I am," she said. "You've done more than I ever expected. More than I could even ask for." I felt warmth flood through me, a release I hadn't known I needed. "Thanks, Mom," I said, sitting beside her. "I only did what had to be done. But it feels good to finally have you see it." She nodded, her eyes glistening, and for the first time in years, I felt that the mother-daughter bond had shifted into something deeper, grounded in understanding and mutual respect. And then there was the business. What started as a small freelance side hustle had grown into a boutique digital agency. I hired a couple of trusted designers and developers, building a small team that shared my vision. The projects became more ambitious, more creative, more challenging, and with each success, my confidence grew. I was no longer the kid who struggled to pay rent. I was the entrepreneur who could dream bigger, who could strategize, who could take risks with a safety net built by my own hands. The financial stability was incredible, yes, but the emotional triumph was greater. For years, I had believed that love, approval, and recognition had to be earned silently, through sacrifice alone. Now I realized that balance mattered, that you could build, grow, and still ask to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be valued. The family began to reflect that. Our dinners transformed from arenas of judgment into spaces of genuine conversation. My siblings asked for advice on their ventures, Mom sought input on her savings and health planning, and I finally felt like an equal, not just the invisible savior in the shadows. One afternoon, as I sat at my desk reviewing contracts, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mom. "I just wanted to say again, I love you, and I see everything you've done. Don't ever doubt that." I smiled, feeling the weight of years of misunderstanding lift completely. That moment crystallized everything I had endured, the long nights, the fear, the secrecy, the struggle, and showed me that triumph wasn't just about money, or recognition, or success in the conventional sense. Triumph was surviving, growing, and finding your place in the world on your own terms. It was about carrying burdens and emerging stronger, and it was about finally being seen, not for the mistakes I might make, but for the perseverance that defined me. Looking back, I realized that every insult, every dismissive remark, every "you can't even pay rent" had become fuel. They didn't break me, they forged me. They forced me to dig deeper, to work harder, to rise above not just financial challenges, but emotional ones as well. I had learned patience, endurance, and the value of quiet strength. And now, as I prepared to move into my own apartment, fully independent, I felt a peace I had never known. Not because the house was paid or the business was growing, but because I had reconciled with my past, acknowledged my own worth, and found a family that finally understood it. The framed photograph Mom had given me, the one of our family in front of the house, sat on my new desk, a reminder that I had saved more than just a home. I had saved the bonds, nurtured the relationships, and most importantly, saved the belief in myself. I leaned back in my chair, eyes scanning the skyline through my apartment window, sunlight spilling across the room. The road had been long, painful, and lonely, but the journey had brought me here, to a place where struggle, sacrifice, and endurance had transformed into triumph, and where love and recognition, once withheld, finally flourished. I smiled, a full, genuine smile, because I knew this was only the beginning. The underdog had not only survived but had grown stronger than anyone had imagined, including myself. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to fully believe it. I was enough, I always had been, and I had arrived. Life, after everything, finally felt like it belonged to me. The weight of secrecy and sacrifice that had defined the last 3 years had lifted, replaced with something far more sustaining: clarity, acknowledgement, and a sense of purpose I could hold in my own hands. My business had grown beyond anything I could have imagined when I was delivering groceries and waiting tables, trying to scrape together enough for Mom's mortgage. I had a small but dedicated team now, clients who respected my time and vision, and the freedom to plan, invest, and dream on my own terms. But the true triumph wasn't the bank account, or the growing portfolio, or even the independence I had fought so hard to achieve. It was the family. Mom had changed in ways I hadn't expected. She became more present, more attentive, no longer seeing me as the embarrassment she once imagined but as a cornerstone of our family. She still had her quirks, still carried the sharp edges of her personality, but now those edges were softened by understanding and respect. She asked for my advice, not just on financial matters, but on life choices, relationships, and her own health. She trusted me in a way she had never done before, and it was profoundly validating. My siblings, too, shifted. My brother started treating me like an equal, no longer the cautionary tale, but someone he could admire and learn from. My sister invited me into her life more openly, sharing her own struggles, her triumphs, and even asking for my insight when she was unsure. For the first time, we were a real family, connected not by expectation or obligation, but by genuine respect and understanding. One evening, we all gathered in the living room, the same room that had once been the site of endless comparisons and subtle digs. Mom had baked cookies, my sister had brought wine, and my brother had put on a playlist of songs from our childhood. I looked around the room and felt a warm, steady glow that had been absent for so long. We laughed, told stories, and shared memories without judgment. The air was lighter, freer, and for the first time, I realized that the struggles I had endured had not just saved a house, they had healed a family. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, still reminders of the past, but now those moments were small and manageable, not the crushing weight they had once been. And me? I had changed too. I had learned resilience, patience, and the value of silent strength. I had learned that triumph isn't always loud or public, sometimes it's quiet, internal, and deeply personal. I had discovered that being the underdog, the one everyone underestimated, could be the most powerful position of all. I had seen firsthand how perseverance, even when unseen or unacknowledged, could shape the world around me. And I had realized that recognition, when it comes, is sweeter because it's earned in silence, in shadows, and through unwavering determination. Looking back, I could see the journey clearly. Every insult, every mocking comment, every time I was told I couldn't even pay rent, it had been a crucible. It had forged in me a combination of grit, intelligence, and compassion that I might never have discovered otherwise. And now, sitting in my own apartment, framed photograph of the family house on my desk, sunlight spilling across the room, I understood something profound. The sacrifices were never about proving anyone else wrong. They were about proving to myself that I could endure, that I could rise, that I could become the person I always knew I was capable of being. I had paid off the mortgage, yes, but I had also earned respect, love, and a sense of belonging I hadn't known I was missing. The lessons I had learned went far beyond finances. They were about life, about relationships, about resilience, and about the quiet power of believing in yourself when no one else does. And as I looked at the photograph, I felt a surge of gratitude, not just for my family, but for the struggles that had shaped me, the nights I had nearly broken, the moments I had almost given up, and the spark of hope that had carried me forward. My future was no longer a distant dream. It was something I could reach for, something I could shape with my own hands. I had been the invisible force that kept a family afloat, and in doing so, I had discovered the power within myself. The weight that once threatened to crush me had been transformed into wings, and for the first time, I felt the exhilaration of lifting off, unbound and unstoppable. That is what triumph feels like, not just survival, but transformation. Not just recognition, but understanding. Not just independence, but freedom. I had endured, grown, and emerged stronger. I had carried the weight of my family, and in doing so, I had carried myself to a place of unimaginable strength. And in that place, I finally allowed myself to hope, to dream, and to live fully, knowing that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I had already proven that I could endure, that I could rise, and that I was, unequivocally, enough.